Right, so the potential for fast-moving consumer goods in Ethiopia over the next 10 years is very significant. And this is illustrated by the fact that there is today 117 million Ethiopians. By certain estimates, in the next 25 years, that number will go to 181 million. Not only is the population increasing, but it's a very young population, which will live longer, but also consume more, partly because purchasing power is increasing. Just to give you as a reference, the per capita GDP of Ethiopia today is relatively low at about $1,000, but there's a forecast put together by the government that by 2030, it will go up to $2,200. So it's more than double in the next 10 years. So large population, increasing purchasing power. And here's the other very important thing you overlay that, which is urbanization. Today, Ethiopia is one of the least urbanized countries in Africa at about 20% urbanization, so 80% is in the rural areas. But we recently did a study which shows that in the next 15 years, 40% of Ethiopia will be urban. So when you combine all these factors together and overlay that with the estimated GDP growth, absolute GDP growth over the next 10 years of about 10.2%, you can see that there is a very large, potentially very large market for fast-moving consumer goods, what we call FMCGs. Now, what are these? We'll be happy to discuss, but at the macro level, this will be what drives the demand for consumer goods in Ethiopia. The demand for, as I said earlier, for fast-moving consumer goods across the board is going to be very significant. However, there are some that are in much bigger demand, and for example, food items, drinks, clothing. I mean, the basics that an urban lifestyle needs, and also the rural lifestyle as it changes will need. So for those who are interested in investing in those sectors, I would say invest in the food sector and the drinks, basic drinks. And I would add pharmaceuticals to this because I know it's not, and normally it's not included in the FMCG category, but healthcare, well-being is now a big focus in Ethiopia. And this is indicated by the fact that 20 years ago, life expectancy was 42, and today it's 67, going to 70. So I would include healthcare and wellness and well-being as being a factor that's in big demand. I think last year, COVID showed us that healthcare is important around the world, but just as important in developing countries like Ethiopia. So these will be some of the main ones. For example, in the food category, edible oil, which is imported, very significant amount of edible oil is imported currently into Ethiopia. Yes, there are new factories being built domestically, but the demand over the next 10 years is going to be so significant. Even with the increased production capacity locally, I think imports will still be needed to meet the demands of something like edible oil. In the drink space, it's not just soft drinks or liquor or beer, but I'm talking about health drinks and milk, for example. Big demand in this country with a growing population. The birth rate in Ethiopia is very, very significant. I think it's 2.5% per year. So you can see there's a big demand for health, dairy products. Those are the kinds of things I would focus on if I was an investor.
The Ethiopian economy is predominantly agriculture based, and it employs over 70% of the population, and it contributes about 32% of the GDP, the gross national domestic product, and it generates over 85% of the exports. And I would say, the sector is really very much underdeveloped. It's not modernized. We've been plowing with oxen since centuries, and we have a lot to do in terms of modernizing the sector. About 80-95% of the farmers are smallholder farmers. We have less than 5% as commercial farmers. So modern farming in Ethiopia is not yet developed, and as a result, the expansion of modern technologies, the adoption of modern technologies is very much limited. So that's really the landscape of the agricultural sector in Ethiopia.
Recently, the government has taken a big measure to improve and expand mechanization in the country. One of the big measures is waiving the taxes. The government's also providing additional support in terms of finance through the bank, which was not there in the previous time. All these combined have initiated the investments on machineries used for agriculture. Our country is at the tractorization step. That means we are importing agricultural tractors, plows, and disc harrows. We cannot say it's fully mechanization, but at least it's the first step in mechanization. So the main equipment currently imported are tractors and implements. Eventually we will grow into using seeding, spraying, harvesting technologies to make a full mechanization expansion. We have only 2 tractors per 100 square kilometer compared to Kenya, which has 27 tractors per 100 square kilometer. Our aim is to increase the number of the tractor in the country so that we can plow more land. We can also relieve our farmers from high labor plowing, and give them also time to do other businesses as well. We have already started, due to the encouragement given by the government, we have already started trying to assemble tractors here, and we are also moving to assembling implements like plows and disc harrows, and also we target to assemble seeders, sprayers, harvesters locally so that we make these agricultural machineries available for emerging farmers.
Ethiopia being in sub-Saharan Africa, in a tropical area, our main focus is primary health care, and that's primary health care for 110 million population. When you are considering medical doctors, health officers, nurses, and midwives, the ratio is around 2, 1.8, 1.9, it's around 2. Therefore, we have to work definitely on producing a lot of medical doctors, nurses, and so on and so forth per the catch. As I said in the beginning, I mean, we are located in the east of Africa, Horn of Africa, and in sub-Saharan Africa, so that is more tropical disease, because we are in the equator, and then tropical disease is mainly the problem. Common communicable disease, it could be diarrheal disease, it could be pneumonia, it could be tuberculosis, it could be malaria, schistosomiasis, and so on and so forth. All the infectious disease and helminthiasis are there as an infectious disease. Diabetes, hypertension, cancer, and all other diseases are really on a rise because the lifestyle of certain group of the society is increasing in number, which was not the case a little bit 10-15 years before, so that we are seeing obviously the impact of non-communicable disease at the same time, like chronic illnesses. So these are the main problems.
Ethiopia is a country where the healthcare system has not fully covered by, especially when we're talking about medical equipment. So the most needed medical equipments in Ethiopia are, almost all of them are needed, but mainly in the diagnostic and imaging parts. These are the most important necessary medical equipments, particularly related with our field. And so the imaging, in imaging we can say CT scan and MRI, ultrasound, X-ray, and also from the laboratory side, all the clinical laboratory lists are very much needed in the country. The reason the imagings and laboratory are important is it's cross-cutting services, because it helps every kind of medical disciplines, starting from the internal medicine, surgery, orthopedics, and name it. All the departments, they need this equipment, and with diagnosis, if you can get a proper diagnosis, it means you are very closely to get a very good result and a much better outcome of the patient's evaluation. Foreign currency is a challenge for everyone, of course, in a country where 90+% is we are importing, and the remaining few, less than 10% we are exporting. Definitely there is a challenge, and there will be a challenge, and there have been a challenge in the past. So this is a main challenge that exists and will continue. So I think the forex challenge can only be solved by a solution created locally, which is like manufacturing. Manufacturing medical equipment is one of the key things. You can start with simple assembly and then develop it into partial manufacturing and more assembly, and then finally full manufacturing. So there are certain stages we should more develop. Very well, very much. We are very much interested in introducing new technologies. We are currently also introducing new technologies from Japan. We are introducing new technologies from any developed country, including Europe, China, India, anywhere in the world. We are very open.
The differentiating factor of Ethiopia compared to many other countries is it also has potentially a very large domestic market. As I said earlier, there's 117 million people already, so that's a very big consumer base. Ethiopia is the third largest economy in sub-Saharan Africa after Nigeria and South Africa. It's the third largest GDP, growing by 10%. When you look at many other countries, they cannot build an industrial base because they lack the raw materials locally, whereas Ethiopia, that's not the case. They lack the labor pool. Ethiopia has 45 million deployable labor pool today as we speak. So that's it's bigger than the populations of almost all African countries except 5, just the labor pool alone. So the composition of the imports will be determined by the availability of raw materials, the industrial base. Ethiopia probably has the largest number of industrial parks in Africa. Certainly, if it's not the largest, certainly number 1 or number 2 or number 3, has invested significantly in building up the industrial base in the country. So a lot of stuff that it imports today will now be produced in these industrial parks, partly for the domestic market, but also a lot of it for the export market. Again, you need to look at industrialization, import substitution in totality, including, of course, the Achilles heel in Africa of building an industrial base. The challenge has always been lack of energy, power, both availability and affordability. And Ethiopia, in this regard, is making very significant investments. As you know, the largest hydroelectric power dam in Africa is nearing completion, which is the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, which will produce over 5,200 megawatts. And a lot of other energy investments have been made or will continue to be made. So, because to have an industrial base, to do import substitution, to change the composition of imports, you need energy. In many African countries, that's been a big challenge. So they cannot build an industrial base, whereas Ethiopia has already demonstrated the capacity. If you look at the clothing industry, I mean, I'm the chairman of a big Italian clothing manufacturer, which has its first African factory here in Ethiopia. And I can tell you our productivity is comparable to any of the factories that we have in Europe at a lower cost. And we export from here as opposed to importing stuff that we used to do, which is, you know, our company has about 5,000 stores around the world. So stuff now being produced in Ethiopia by an Italian company, of course, but exported around the world. Those are the types of, you know, import substitutions, and as well as, more importantly, exports that Ethiopia has demonstrated it's capable of, and we'll see that growing in the near future.